Hey everyone, I'm live on Facebook as well. I just discovered at the very last minute that I can go live on Facebook. So I thought, sod it, may as well. Good to see you all here. Sod it. Oh, I better turn
May as well.
off a minute. There you go. I don't think I'm literally pausing that, am I? It's just pausing it for me. I'll just turn that off and forget about that actually. Right, I hope everyone is well. I just want to check, is the chat on for everyone? To everyone. Yeah, I assume the chat works. Can someone just type in it like hi? And then if I don't get one, I will assume that it's not. I assume there's therefore no chat. Unless, oh no, it is on. Oh wait, there you go. It should be on now. Chat with everyone. There you go. It's on now. It's on. And look, hi Katie, hi Coco, yeah, hi Jenny, good, hi Tony. Right, so I mean, with the chat, it's like hi Siva, or Shiva. I'm not sure if I've got that correct, and I recognise you as well, your name, because you've just kind of burst into my field. I'm like, oh, hello, I might come and say hi to you, Siva. Cool, thank you. Yeah, what was I going to say about the chat? Yeah, like I don't have any special requirements around the chat. If you want to share things in the chat as you go, you can. There is a Q&A though as well. Oh yeah, I can see some of you are putting it, so let me know chat's disabled. So if you have any questions during, put them into the Q&A. And then I will do my best to address them at the end. We may go a little bit over the hour doing that, but if there are questions, please don't feel like you can't come in. Oh, it's 11:11, but I think that's only on my laptop, which is slightly fast. Oh, welcome. Thank you for being here. It's really lovely turnout, actually, really nice to see so many of you here. I'll just take a moment to land all the way, do what you need to do, make sure you're settled. So I have both up at the same time, that's annoying. Bear with me a moment. I'm just going to faff with my tech. There you go, I can do that. We'll get going. As you can see and hear, I'm going to be delivering this spell with a somewhat nasally, croaky voice. Again, I mean, I'm way better than I sound at the moment. I'm actually feeling pretty sprightly, just releasing an unlimited amount of mucus. And we've just run out of tissue as well. Great. Right, let me get my bits up. Okay, check I'm still working on Facebook. I have no idea if I'm just going to be speaking into an empty void on Facebook, but just go with it. Yeah, there I am. Fantastic. Okay, cool. So I've been really, really looking forward to delivering this one. And I realized that in many ways, it's just another way of saying the same thing. It's just a different combination of words and sentences that point to a thing that runs through everything. Yeah, you know, and I really believe this is the case with many kind of like core spiritual teachings. We just have to find as many different ways to point to what is essentially the same thing, and it's a thing that we constantly miss and overlook, and actually just sometimes straight up reject it. And you know, like as I said, it's like this really is the case, I think, with any line of inquiry that's designed to move us in the direction of what we might call spiritual awakening. And you know, I use that term quite loosely, but to choose that thing that we might call awakening. And you know, I'm discovering that you really do have to choose it. You really do have to be a yes. Is to be like in the like fullest possible realization of the, in many senses, actually unfathomable extent of our power, and therefore the extent of the responsibility that we have for that power. So it's like we want it, you know, there's this thing that's really drawing us towards it, but we are also given to dropping it like a hot potato as soon as we touch it. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about responsibility and what I really mean in relation to grace, and what it is in relation to grace. And you know, small clue here, it has nothing to do with blame or self-blame. But the point I really want to stick with for now is that grace is like, it's one of those hot potatoes. You only have to choose it. Yet choosing it in every single moment can feel so wild and so radical and so at odds with our conditional conditioning that we kind of just throw it on the floor and like stare at it from a distance in disbelief. So I've been really looking forward to this one because there is like a basiness underneath this transmission that really kind of reverberates upwards and all the way through. Because I don't have any reservations about the potato anymore, right? And I really used to, and I really deeply recognize that that state of having reservations. Like I knew it for a long while. I knew the truth of it for a long while, but now I really fucking know. And man, we're just gonna stay with the potato thing. It's no longer like searing hot to hold. Right? The conviction is airtight. And what I see like very clearly now is like just how much connection and nourishment and really, to be honest, just how much of life we deny ourselves off when we actually deny grace. And like, let's just come straight in with the hard truth here, that actually to deny grace is to, on the deepest level, deny ourselves. And, you know, when I talk about that state of reservation, I mean the way that we regard it with almost like suspicion. We're like, no, I can't just let myself off for everything. I can't stop working on myself. I can't just let my humanity go. I'll turn into a potato. And an evil one. You know, that's the really common thing. It's like, I'll turn evil, motionless. And I use potato there as to denote like almost like a motionlessness. And I just won't move if I'm not working on myself. So bringing like a collection of things that I have said like countless times before, of course, because it's always about saying the same thing, really. And also just some new things and some new ways of saying it. I really want to try and frame this so that you can take in like and really feel that bass reverberating all the way up, all the way through. So as always, and if you've like been to a teaching with me before, like I always invite you to just really breathe this thing in. Breathe it in above all else. And as much as you can, be all the way here for it, whether you're here live or you're here for the recording. Be all the way here for it. Like I said, there's Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can pop them in. I'll come to them at the end. So just take a breath here for a moment. Big, long, deep breath in through nose and out. Well, if you can breathe through your nose, I can actually barely breathe through my nose at the moment. Oh, but land, right? And I'm gonna start with a thing that I have said a lot. The only way to really release patterning and programming that is not for us, that doesn't serve us, that is maladaptive and, you know, perhaps even destructive, is to form new connections. And I understand this to be true, you know, at the most minute level of the neurology, right? We can't. What we often do, what we're predisposed to doing is hyper focusing on the thing that we keep repeating that we don't want to keep repeating, and in hyper focusing on it, it gets tighter. And it gets tighter because what we're actually doing is clamping down. We are tightening around it. All that is the most deeply aligned to our well-being will naturally and effortlessly fall away in light of the new connection. And the more we fixate, the tighter it gets. Because, and here's a thing, you know, important piece to really consider here is like, the more we fixate on the thing that's like tightly bound and repeating itself, you know, whatever it is, smoking cigarettes, checking your phone, some kind of painful experience you have in a relationship, whatever it is. For as long as we're like tightening around that, we're actually not in the extending of grace. And this is like the wider point that I really want to make, is that grace and the frequency of it is the soul new connection. SOLE and SOUL. It's like, what I mean by that is it's like a main plug. It's a really fucking big plug. And when you plug it in, a whole load of other stuff will just naturally, effortlessly fall away. It'll lose power. It'll lose power because you're taking that power, your power, and you're wiring it into this giant soul plug. So what's over there, that thing that you might have been fixating on over there, and problems, all of the problems that you think you need to solve and sort out, within and without, all of the shortcomings you think you have, all of the things that you think you need to work on. And the false meaning, right, that we give to stuff in our lives that we prefer wasn't there. It doesn't have any power going into it anymore. It is a monumental, like gargantuan shift in attention. And therefore shift in power. And the only person who can make that shift is you. I've been getting this message over and over again, and I want to, because I have, you know, the trickiest mind. And it is, but it has been both, you know, the curse and the gift. It means that I can really go through these things layer by layer, because every single possible bind that you could have, every single possible way the mind might be able to talk you out for truth, like, and this was, I want to speak to a specific thing that came up. I've been getting this like inner message, this deeper message over and over again from what I recognize as my soul. Like, and I really recognize it. It's like, you just choose it. You just choose it, right? So when I say the only person who can make the shift is you, I come back to this piece on like, you choose it. And I've been getting this message over and over again, and it's kicked my ass over and over again. This truth that you choose awakeness, you choose presence, you choose grace. And it, you know, it being as simple as a choice can really be quite irritating for certain parts of us when there are so many different pathways, old, out-of-date connections that seem to run in direct conflict with that choice. But the thing is, you know, I'm sure we can all appreciate, as soon as you say inwardly or outwardly, I can't, then of course you can't. You know, we don't have agency to choose for as long as we don't believe we have it. And beyond making choices that are about control, because we can very easily do that, and this was my bind, it's like we can attempt to make choices that keep us in check. We can try not to think all of the thoughts. Definitely times we can make healthy choices that we judge to be healthy, choices that we judge to be unhealthy, and we can essentially make all of these fucking rules and contort our behavior. But beyond all of that, literally beyond all of that, is choosing grace. Grace is the only choice we can make that is beyond all of that, beyond all control. You can't control that. Beyond all agendas to try and control something. Grace is the only strategy that has no strategy. The strategy is I have no strategy. I just give grace. and space. And we'll come to that tomorrow, of course. These things bleed into one another. And this is so important. Like, I've literally argued with that soul voice over this for a long while, this message to just choose it. Choose presence, choose awakeness, choose grace. Like, my mind has automatically conflated it with, oh, right, I just need to control myself more. And then obviously I hit a wall because I'm like, well, I know that's not what this is about. That is not what you are asking me to do, right? Amy, pop that in the Q&A for me, love, and I'll come back to it. So how else do I choose it without control, right? And the realization that grace is beyond it, that giving myself grace is beyond all of that and really is the only choice, or at least it's the primary choice that precedes all others. You know, it's been instrumental. And the way I kind of want to frame it here is like, grace is like the motherboard. It's like this essential foundation. Everything else flows from that, from a state of grace. Everything that I need to know, everything that I need to say, everything that I need to do flows out of that motherboard. It is the motherboard of creation. I said yesterday in a live on Instagram, like, it's the core of what we are. And Amy, actually, in response to that question now, I've heard different definitions of grace. Can you define? I actually want to invite you to actually be with that, with what I'm saying, because I feel like your mind's asking me that question. Like, breathe it in. I will come back to it. And it's really funny as well, because I'm just looking at some of my order and I'm like, oh, well, actually, this may answer your question. Because actually, I kind of want to get into a description of the state. Although I say a description of the state, we'll just get into it. You know, like, the way that I would readily define it is that the deepest state of, like, really being in grace and giving ourselves grace is actually just a total allowing of everything that is arising right now. It's just like the willingness to be with exactly what is here, fully embodied willingness, no resistance to it, no judgment, no trying to make it something other than what it is, no work. And when we're settled, and this is why I'm like, oh, I may answer your question. When we're settled inside and, like, fully plugged into this motherboard, and we've made the choice to, like, flow our power into it, like, when we're settled, when there's nothing out there disturbing things, it's like, fucking slamming. It's lovely. I'd like to be there all the time. I much prefer that. And like, and being, just being able to be there in spots has been a revelation for me after a lifetime and possibly lifetimes, probably lifetimes, almost definitely lifetimes of constantly racing intrusive thoughts, noise, and just really actually becoming addicted to and dependent upon the noise, because it was actually too jarring to consider what might be beyond the noise. The noise became the thing that protected me from the onslaught that came with being sensitive. So this location of being fully plugged in and settled down was a revelation, because there was virtually no noise. My thoughts exist, but they recede almost as soon as they arise. I have no need to think 4 steps ahead of myself, because there's this deep-rooted sense of safety that knows. You know, like I can just feel that energy pouring in now, that knows without a doubt that I'll just know what to do next. I'll know what to say. I'll know what decision I need to make. I'll just know what the next step is when I know it. And being all the way in my senses is rich. It's a pleasure. And I'm in my senses in a way where my mind isn't labeling anything. It's just pure perception, pure noticing, pure presence, pure being, zero meaning making, flow. And once upon a time, I did not know this kind of state existed. I just lived in noise and in fear. And then I'd say that it was probably back in, I think it's 2018, 17 or 18, after a Vipassana meditation retreat, I tasted it, but I kind of almost immediately wrote it off, because I was like, well, I just did close to 70 or 80 hours of meditation in 10 days, possibly more, I don't really know. But of course, I'm going to feel super expanded afterwards, and then it's just going to be quite fleeting. And then following that, like over the years, I'd have like a fleeting hour or so of it every so often. I have this memory, actually, that is just coming to me now, of just being in a cafe with my husband. It was a good few years ago now. And that state just pouring in and being like, wow. This real, like, connected to everything state. And it'd come in every so often. Like, wow, like, can I have that? And then maybe just a little voice would be like, no, you can't have that. But maybe just, you know, for like half an hour every so often. And you go back to your noise. And then, as many of you know, I journeyed with Iboga 3 years ago. Come back to this often. And I dropped into, after the hardest couple of nights and days of my life, dropped into 5 solid weeks of it, 5 or 6 solid weeks. And kind of sat on my mountain. But at that point, I was like, oh, well, fuck, this is possible. But I had also taken an enormous flood dose of a very, very strong psychotropic plant that literally wiped all of my neurological receptor sites clean in one of the most insane and difficult journeys of my life, you know, kind of like the Vipassana retreat. It was extreme. I've always gone to these extremes, right? My seeking has sent me to these extremes. You know, even the drug abuse when I was younger, it was like an extreme. I was just like trying to find this thing. And then, of course, after that, I watched in horror as all of my old grooves came back online. I really punished myself for it. And then since then, over the last 3 years, this fog of noise has gotten thinner and thinner and thinner. And I'm like, oh, this is mine. And not only that, this is everyone's. It's not just possible for me, it's inevitably possible for all. And we are all moving towards it anyway, one way or another. We are being initiated into this way of being, right? Into awakeness. If you start really paying attention, you will see how literally every single thing in your life is initiating you into awakeness. But what we have is a choice as to whether we go with or against the flow of it, of that initiation. And the choice to move with the flow, like underlying that, is nothing other than the extension of grace. And there are many words we can use, like surrender, opening. I don't disagree with those words, but I also think it is super easy. And I suppose with any word, it's easy to just turn them. And I, again, have done this, have been around the block many times with this, like turning words like this into these really highly complex algebraic equations where we try and work it out. Like, how do I open? How do I surrender? How? But ultimately, like, grace is just the thing. It's just here. It just is. Even in places where there is resistance and we're like going against the flow and we're in denial of what's happening, we give grace to it. Even in places where there's self-rejection and self-beating, we give grace to it. So you see, like, the reason why it's beyond everything is because it doesn't matter what your experience is in this moment, or what you think about it, or how you feel about it, or what the story is of it. Grace is always there, just beyond it. And we can always lean back into it. It's never not there. There is no possible experience that you could be having where grace is not present. And the only thing that deepens and that compounds resistance and self-rejection is the denial of grace itself, which is ultimately self-denial, which is incredibly painful. Of course, that's going to hurt. Of course, the belief that there is ever a moment where it does not exist is going to hurt. And so much of this practice is about connecting down and into the thing that is always there, even when you don't feel like it's there. You know, when you think, oh, I just beat myself up, so grace isn't here. I'm not giving myself grace. Oh no, like, I need to go and find it. Ray told me that I have to extend grace to everything, but I beat myself up. I'm really wrong. Grace is still there the whole time. Motherboard is always there. And the choice is in flowing your electricity, your attention, and your power through it. And I think actually, like, the best comparison I can give is it's like our relationship to our body. And actually, on many senses, that relationship to our body is intrinsically linked. Our body is always here, you know, for as long as we are alive in this lifespan, our body is here. We always have a body. We don't have to really try and find our body. It's right fucking here. And so is grace. And in many senses, grace is the body. It's in the body. The body is grace. It's an embodiment. Because anything that isn't ultimately an extension of grace that isn't coming from that foundation of grace. It's not embodied. It will be a mind clamp. You don't need to have a frame of reference for the experience of grace. You don't need to have proof of it. And actually, I could go off on a whole other tangent about belief systems in general and the fallacy of proof. But there comes a point in this practice and in our spiritual work where we have to concede without proof that it just is, that we just are. And you make that choice, or the choice that you make is in acknowledging that it just is without needing to feel a certain way or have it do something for you. I think a lot of us get stuck there. And the more deeply you can detangle yourself from the need to have it, or any spiritual teaching for that matter, do something for you, solve a problem for you, make a thing that you don't like go away for you, the more you're actually able to open up to that state of flow that I was describing, because that state of flow requires capacity. If we are constantly in a place of trying to use this work to make things go away, like we're not actually building any capacity. We're not expanding into wholeness because we're still rejecting parts of the whole. And the best way we can practice with this, and I think this is really important, by the way, is actually framing it as a practice. But one of the best ways we can practice with it is actually with our internal world and with our thoughts, and with noticing the way that we hold ourselves to ransom for the thoughts that we have. So we often make this mistake where with our thoughts, where something comes in, like a thought just comes in, and maybe it's a judgment or it's a jealous thought or something that we decide is not good. And instead of it just being allowed to pass through, the thought gets caught in the clutches of what it means about you, or even like a slightly sneakier version is, this thought must mean that I have something. So better like try to focus on it and try to fix it. And we think that not doing this is like avoiding or bypassing or like being irresponsible or something. I want to break this down because especially for those of us that like have a really like obsessive pathways, is really important. Because of course, like avoidance and bypassing, you know, it's a thing. I'm not going to deny that it's a thing. But I think the point here is that in the same way that you are not here when you're hyperfixating, like feel into that energy. Like if you recognize this, like feel into it. It's like when you're like clamped down on something, it's like a part of you is like not there. You're stuck here. But also when you're in that bypassing state, you're also not here. So the question here is like, what does it mean to be here with everything, with the full spectrum of everything? And then it's, the practice is to keep resolving, to just coming back here. No matter how far you perceive yourself to have drifted off. As soon as you come back, you just celebrate that you've returned. And it really, please let that be like a forever permission slip, that you just celebrate the fact that you've returned. So much space is liable to open up in that choice to just celebrate that you have returned and leave anything that is swirling behind. That is grace. Holding yourself to ransom, I think, is quite a subtle kind of energetic phenomenon. It's like phenomenon. It's like we carry the residue of the bad thought around with us, and it's like a stale smell, and a part of us is kind of like left back there in the past, because somewhere in the past that's no longer there anymore, we ascribed a meaning to what was happening, and now the meaning kind of hangs off of us and stops us from being here. And meaning is present only. You know, when I talk about pure perception, that is meaning. That is true meaning. Yet what most of us often have is this really, really tightly wound meaning maker, labeler that gives meaning and often ascribes it willy-nilly in a very disorganized, random, overzealous fashion. But true meaning is purely sensory. It doesn't have a mind voice. If your mind is ascribing meaning, let's just be clear, it's not real. And sometimes that voice can be so quick as to not even appear as a voice. Sometimes it hits your nervous system and you're in reaction before you can stop yourself. And look, that is the practice. All I can say here is that the willingness to give grace will inevitably result in those lightning speed moments, eventually slowing down. And then, of course, in the slowing down, you'll be able to hear the voice and make a different decision. But ultimately, the choice here is to really practice letting content go. Like, what if you just did that for a day? Even an hour. You start with an hour. What if you just, even 10 minutes, actually? What if you just resolve to commit to your sensory experience and to just celebrate coming back to it more deeply than your thoughts for 10 minutes, hour, day? And I think this can be a thing that's really helpful to just kind of microdose in that sense in the beginning, so that you know that it's possible, and also so that you can really be with the parts of you that are like, oh my God, that is not safe. Because you will really start to see just how elaborate the structure is that you've built that protects you from just being in that pure sensing state that we were all designed to be in and create from. And the grace part is that your attention is on coming back, and that you only ever celebrate coming back. Whether it be just feeling your hands on the steering wheel of your car, or your feet on the floor, breeze on skin. Holding yourself to ransom is like getting like annoyed because you got distracted. And then the thought or the distraction hangs off you and further affects your capacity to engage with the moment. So you always celebrate coming back. Celebrating coming back to the moment will allow what was unnecessarily plaguing you to just wash off. You'll find that with practice, I think, that you actually just, the more you practice it, the more you actually just forget what you were even spinning about. Like, especially if you you actually just start to forget. And I actually, when I think back to this practice in the beginning, I could really feel how strong the pull was. No, we need to go back and solve this little problem that we've just created. The pull is strong, man. It can be incredibly strong. So I don't want to overlook that. I don't want to gloss over that. But I wish I had someone to just very, very clearly say, it's okay just to come back here. And not to think, oh, am I avoiding a problem? Am I bypassing? There is nothing that is more important than what is right fucking here. Interesting, Coco. I love that. I love that when things are kind of affirmed and repeated. Nothing is more important. Most of what our mind beams up is fucking nonsense. Because we have conditioned our mind to scream like Mayday in the face of intimacy and connection and presence with life, because it's trained to survive. It will panic. It will get very busy when we stop giving it problems to solve. I need to survive. Things get quiet. Does this mean we're dying? So if there is a part of your mind right now that's like, but sometimes there are very real problems that I need to solve, Ray, that I need to fixate on, like, what would it mean to just give grace to that? Because until you concede that actually it's not that important, and I'm going to go into this a little bit more with space tomorrow, why it's not that important. But until you conceive that it's not that important, because nothing is actually more important than giving grace to yourself in the present moment, which is presence, you won't be able to see what truly matters. Like, let that land. You won't be able to see what truly matters. And you actually have to be prepared here to discover that everything that you thought really, really mattered doesn't matter at all. When all of that structure that we've built starts to come down, that was designed to protect us from living, sheer fucking amount of things that suddenly do not matter anymore. And this brings me on to the final piece, which is, I'm just going to repeat a thing that I've said before that I'll never stop saying, which is that self-compassion, another word for grace, self-compassion is the highest form of personal responsibility. Unconditional self-compassion is the highest form of personal responsibility. It's not possible to see clearly if grace isn't a lens that we are able to apply to our experience. And I know that can feel really hard hitting to say, because if you are really, really deep in patterns of self-punishment, I know that can then translate to me saying, well, you can't see clearly. And there is truth to that. It's not possible to see things as they are and to see people as they are. And of course, above all, to see yourself as you are, if those patterns are deep and they're running, and you're tangled up in them. And I guess I just want to address this in a way, because there can be like a compounding there that happens where it's like, oh my God, well, I can't trust myself. But then, right, I come back to this piece. Grace is the thing that's just beyond all of that. You give grace to it. There's like a stopping there. Like when we're really, really tangled up, like when I consider grace, it's like the stopping. But in a relational sense, like, and again, I'm going to expand on this tomorrow because this really is where grace bleeds into and becomes space, right? Stopping. But relationally, like it's very difficult to engage in, real repair and make wise decisions and be in intimate connection if you're not plugged into it. If you're being really, really hard on yourself all the time, you will unconsciously take on other people to do the punishing and to feel punished by and to have that experience of punishment. And it will be pointing to something in you that continues to play out the whole time. And for as long as we are not flowing any electricity into this plug, we will continue to encounter situations that reflect it back, which is both very necessary and can also be very painful and is also an incredible act of grace, right? To discover that for as long as we have certain belief systems, we will forever encounter proof that confirms that belief system. Oh, wait. So my new connection, right, is a new belief system, and is just choosing first to have faith in that belief system, enough to start flowing some electricity into it, to start shifting the attention, and then to watch as what is reflected back starts to transform. Proof is simply a reflection of where we are placing our attention in what we believe, and a reminder that the motherboard is right here. You only need to flow your electricity into it for the attention to shift. And thus for the content of the proof to shift. This is how we create. And this is also, of course, how we get really, really responsible. It's the hot potato. Ah, so hot. Full unconditional grace, and this is why we find it so difficult, full unconditional grace for ourselves in every moment of every day, at all times, will require us to see that we are fucking immense creators. So you see how unconditional self-compassion is the highest form of personal responsibility. And look, and come back to it again, as soon as you do the thing where you're like, I'm not being self-compassionate, so I'm just not being responsible, I'm doing it wrong, grace is beyond it. It doesn't matter what the content is, you just keep giving it grace. There's nothing else to be done. And what happens there is that grace becomes a container that is so airtight that wrongness, that perception of inherent wrongness that runs in direct conflict to it, you just can't get in anymore. You realize through every cell of your being that you cannot get it wrong. And grace becomes a limitless backdrop, and it is reflected back to you in every moment, in everything, regardless of what is happening, regardless of the content, regardless of whether it's a really, really beautiful thing that's happening or a really fucking rotten shit thing. And from there, you can see everything as it is, and you see everyone as they are. And that is the most responsible position, and it is also the most creative position. Let me just read. You're very welcome, Coco. And that really kind of, that wraps us up, actually. And the only question I had was at the beginning about different definitions of grace. And I actually just that I have probably answered that question in a few different ways as we've gone on. So, Amy, when you catch up with the rest of the recording, I hope that clears things up. And it's like almost bang on 12, which is amazing because I usually run over a bit. I will leave it one more minute just in case anyone has any questions. Otherwise, thank you all so much for being here. You cannot get it wrong. Breathe. I think you breathed into my system. It landed and it still lands. Yeah, this is so important. We have to keep coming back to it because there is a level of subtlety that it can run at, and we discover these new layers of subtlety. Oh, you know, even when we stop intellectually saying to ourselves, I've got it wrong, and we stop bashing ourselves, it gets a little bit more subtle, a little bit more subtle, a little bit more subtle. And it's just always an opportunity to just go deeper, go deeper, go deeper. This is one of those teachings where there is just an infinite amount of depth that you can go to with it and sink back and into. You're so welcome, Sophie. Thank you, Karen. You're welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. It was a real pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. So hopefully see some of you tomorrow at the same time. I fucking love you all, and I'll speak to you soon. Mwah.